Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we're going to be looking at the great classic of Indian literature, the Bhagavad Gita, from a psychological perspective. My guest is Professor Kiran Kumar Salagame, who is a former chair of the psychology department at the University of Mysore in India. He is also the vice president of the International Transpersonal Association and is the author of The Psychology of Meditation, a Contextual Approach. Welcome, Kiran.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, it's a pleasure too.
Yes. So you've been exploring Indian psychology. You've been endeavoring to integrate modern Western psychology with the great classical, spiritual, mystical literature of India.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's a difficult task.
Yeah, it is indeed a difficult task because modern psychology has emerged from an empirical standpoint, whereas the whole of the Indian tradition has a transcendental basis. So when you bring them together, there are lots of ontological and epistemological issues to be resolved.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's been really the thrust of your work for decades.
Yeah, that has been like that because I started getting interested in the Indian tradition as a psychology student, not as an Indian or as a Hindu or from any Sanskritist background or tradition.
Mm-hmm. We'll be talking about the Bhagavad Gita, and that is the great classic of Indian literature, Hindu literature particularly, and it refers to these transcendental states.
Yeah, that is the basis of Bhagavad Gita, because as you know, the most important personality in Bhagavad Gita is Arjuna, who is a warrior, who is a hero, who is a heir apparent along with his brothers for a throne which was snatched away by his cousin family.
Yes.
So that leads to a warlike situation, and Arjuna is in the battlefield, and his maternal uncle, his philosopher, his guide, the divine incarnate, Krishna, has chosen to be his charioteer, because Krishna had taken a vow on principle that he will not fight directly in the war and will not take any sides with either of the camp. So when he as a charioteer brings him into the battlefield, Arjuna sees and confesses a whole army, and they are all his kith and kins.
Yes.
So his guru is there, his acharyas, the people who taught him archery, the warfare, they are there. His uncle, granduncle, his cousin brothers, his whole family is right opposite to him. And he has to fight them, he has to kill them. So he gets despondent, he gets dejected, and he wants to get away, from battlefield, and he says, I don't need all this kingdom, I don't need anything, I don't want to win this war by killing my own people. So it's a deep moral and ethical dilemma that he faces. Mm-hmm. So then Krishna was supposed to have tried to bring him out of a limited consciousness in which we identify ourselves with so many things. If I want to use a modern psychological term, it is biopsychosocial identity. Arjuna is in biopsychosocial identity.
Arjuna, the warrior prince, Krishna, the charioteer, who I guess is also an avatar of the god Vishnu.
Yes, yes. So he starts giving him counseling in the modern sense. First, he says, this is not appropriate for a war hero to back up in the battlefield. Then he brings up the issue of fame and prestige. And then he gradually, moves further from the idea of social to psychological and tries to remove his conflict. And he says, you are in this conflict because you are identifying with something which is not real. The self that you have created is not the real self. There is a self beyond, which is transcendental, which is spiritual, and you need to go back, go up, so to say. You can either say go up if you think it is higher. You can say go back if you think that is the witness. So both, the metaphor of up or back fits into this transcendental awareness. In the sense of up, it is lifting yourself up from the narrow framework. If it is stepping back, you can be a witness to everything that happens. So Krishna says to Arjuna, there is one classic statement which is referred all over. Yogastha kuru karmani. Being established in that state, do all actions. So, which state? It is the state of transcendence, state of spiritual self-awareness. Okay. So, that is the whole essence of the Gita teaching.
When you are in this transcendental state, you can engage in any action whatsoever.
Yeah. That will not taint you. That will not affect you. Yeah.
It's always puzzled me because India is the home of ahimsa, the philosophy of nonviolence.
Yes.
And yet the great classic of spiritual literature is urging Arjuna, the warrior, to go into battle and defeat to the death his own cousins.
Yes. See, you are seeing nonviolence in a limited perspective. When you see that the whole idea of violence is seen from a person-to-person angle.
Yes.
But here is a situation where a group of people have done violence continuously.
Yes.
And the violence of that kind, which is with power, combined with power, needs to be met with the same kind of power. Because there is a statement within Bhagavad Gita which says, Guna guneshu pravartate. That means there is another concept, Triguna. Triguna means the fundamental principles of the universe. There are three aspects to that. One is called Sattva, which is the principle of illumination and creativity. The second one is the principle of energy, that is called Rajas. And the third one is the principle of inertia, which is called Tamas. So these three principles are operating in the whole universe, whether we call it matter or mind. So, Krishna is telling it is these three principles which are operating in the whole universe, and they are meeting, they are in combination in everything. So, it is those principles which are meeting. A violent principle is there. In a very violent way, that principle meets the another violent principle and nullifies it. So, even it is puzzling to me, not only to you, and to many Indians, it is puzzling that on the one hand we speak of nonviolence, and on the other hand, this Bhagavad Gita speaks of the clashes, right? But it is puzzling to me and you because we are not in the transcendental state. And the people, the ages together, so many saints, so many rishis, so many yogis, who have affirmed the idea of transcendence, who have affirmed the transcendental self, they are able to see it from a standpoint where they can reconcile the opposite of violence and non-violence. So, me as a person functioning in the ordinary awareness cannot, assert or justify what it is, but I can, within the understanding of my limited awareness, I am just putting across to you, this is how it is seen in the tradition.
Yes.
I'm neither justifying it, nor I'm explaining it away. I'm just trying to say that when a person is in the transcendental state, then that person is said to have gone beyond the dualities, the binaries. So therefore, whatever that has been said in the Bhagavad Gita has come from a different dimension. So we need to reach to that. We cannot bring it down. So that's my point of view.
I think it's useful for our viewers to point out that the Bhagavad Gita is one section in a much larger work called the Mahabharata, which goes into great detail about the injustices that occurred that lead up to the battlefield.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's right.
It's a great epic poem comparable, I suppose, to Homer's Iliad or Odyssey.
Yeah, that is true. There are many different versions of Bhagavad Gita, and people have, here and there, they have mentioned that the existing version is an accumulation of the oral tradition, and in the beginning, it was only a few poems. You see, now it has added on. But you see, Indian time scale, when exactly the Mahabharata war happened and how many centuries ago, nobody is able to pin down exactly. So in a continuous oral tradition, poems of wisdom could have been added to that. But the existing version is faithfully followed by people who believe in that. So my take on this as a psychologist, see, I'm looking at it as a psychologist. My take is what is being said in the Bhagavad Gita. In the first chapter is what is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, where there is a description of what is the battlefield, how Arjuna got into despondency, and he describes his own mental and physiological state to Krishna, and Krishna listens to him. So it is like, the first interview session with a client who is in distress. So the whole of first chapter, one part of that is that. Another part is the opposite character, Duryodhana, who is actually the person who was responsible in a way for the this whole situation of war, and his father is Dhritarashtra, who was blind, born, and he's been explained or described by his own charioteer, who was given the divine vision, you can say clairvoyance, who describes the battlefield to him sitting in the palace. This is what is happening, all the elephants, all the horses, all the army is now coming, now they are standing here, so and so is standing, Bhima is standing there, Arjuna is standing here, and Duryodhana is in that place, Bhishma is in that place. So all this is described to Dhritarashtra by his charioteer through a distant vision, which is given to him by Krishna.
Similar to what parapsychologists today call remote viewing.
Remote viewing, exactly. In fact, Krishna offers Dhritarashtra himself the remote viewing. viewing capacity, because he was divine incarnate. It sounds, far-fetched now for us.
Well, not to me.
Okay, not to you. That's good. But Dhritarashtra declines. He says, I can't see all that by myself, so don't bestow that to me. You bestow that to my charioteer. He will be there for me to describe everything. So the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is full of that description of the battlefield, Arjuna's despondency. And from the second chapter up to 18th chapter, there is a whole range of discussion about, what is the basic human nature. How we are born with what you call good or divine dispositions and also demonic dispositions. How we have to overcome in life, and how we have to attain the highest state, that is the transcendence, you see. And what are the two paths? In the second chapter itself, the two paths will come. The two paths are called Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya is the path of intellect, path of knowledge. Yoga is the path of action, effortful action, in a very broad sense. So you can inquiry, the path of inquiry and the path of action. So in the rest of the chapters, Krishna has been actually elaborating on what exactly is the path of inquiry and what exactly is the path of yoga. So the path of yoga, he also speaks of Nishkama Karma Yoga. That means action without attachment, or action with detachment, or acting without getting attached oneself to fruits of one's action. So there is another famous statement which most of the Hindus, keep hearing about it. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. That means you have right only on your action, not on the reward. This is completely opposite of internal locus of control, where you see that we have the internal external locus of control, where the internal locus of control is, I believe the rewards will follow my action, only based on my action. Whereas the external locus of control belief is that besides my action, some fate or luck or chance or something actually, gives you the benefit, gives you the result. So this is well-known locus of control concept which came up in 1966. You are familiar with it.
Oh, sure. It's well understood in psychology. I think the way I would understand that concept is that internal locus of control means that people take responsibility for themselves. And external locus of control is usually, I had no choice, I had to do this because of other events or circumstances forced me. And typically, I think successful people have more internal locus of control in our culture.
That is right. But the taking responsibility part is one thing. But the actual definition of internal locus and external locus, which was given by Ferez, Julian Rotter, and one more person. So these three is that basically what you believe. Do you believe that the outcome depends on your action, or do you believe depends on the fate or chance or luck? So there was, back in 1970s when I was a student, many researchers did cross-cultural work, you see, and they came up with the view that generally the Asians, Indians, are external in locus of control belief. Because they believe more in fate, chance, luck, etc. Whereas the Western individualistic society, people believe more in internal locus of control. So this was some kind of a stereotype.
Yes.
But actually, if you look into the Indian tradition has never, agreed with the idea of fate, chance, or luck as the final outcome, because your effort is always recognized, but there is a higher dimension within which you are operating. Now, when you take our action always happens within whatever information and knowledge we have about the consequence of my action. But that depends upon my awareness and my understanding of what are all the relevant variables, how much I can control. But in the cosmic plan, there could be variables which are beyond our control, we are not aware of. It is not in our hands to control them. And there is a cosmic plan. So therefore, you are supposed to act, but you are also supposed to take into account the transcendental or the cosmic dimension and act.
Yes.
So your control is not just personal, it is transpersonal. So here in the Bhagavad Gita, it is saying the same thing. You have a right to act or right not to act. You see? Or you can do something else also. But in any given situation, when you act, you have a motive to act or a resolution. Then you need certain instruments or way of achieving what you want. Okay? You must have a goal and you must have that intense desire to act. But even if you have all these things which will lead to success, it says, Panchamam Daiva Chintanam. The fifth one is divine thinking. The outcome may be influenced by something which is higher. So therefore, you prepare yourself with 4 aspects and act. And don't expect the result to turn out in the same way, because there is a 5th one which is not in your control. It is not a variable you can control.
In other words, you can control your action, but you can't control the final outcome.
That is exactly. So that is the crux of Karma Yoga, according to Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, if you attach yourself to the outcome, then you start feeling, depressed, dejected. You start, all kinds of negative emotions can start occurring to you. So better you do it with the awareness that there is a higher dimension where the final outcome will be determined. So this is one of the important teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And, the another teaching of Bhagavad Gita comes out in a concept called Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna means a person established in that higher awareness. So, in the 2nd chapter, Arjuna, the war hero, he is told by Krishna that be a Sthita Prajna, be established in that higher awareness. So, Arjuna asks Krishna, okay, who is a Sthita Prajna? What are his characteristics? I don't know. I learned some of these things when I was in high school, 9th standard. It was part of my Sanskrit teaching class, So in that I say, Sthita Pragnasya ka bhasha. What are his characteristics? How does he sit? How does he walk? How does he speak? Tell me. So Arjuna is asking Krishna, give me the behavioral description of a Sthita Prajna. So then Krishna answers. The first sloka says, how Sthita Prajna will be? He will not be aggrieved in sorrow. It says, Dukkeshu anudvigna manaha. Sukheshu vigata spruhaha. He is not grieved in sorrow. He is not over-exuberant, over-excited when something happiness occurs. Okay. And then he has conquered desire, fear, anger. See, desire, fear and anger. He has overcome them. He is said to be a Sthita Prajna, one who has achieved a balanced state of mind. So what does it mean is, you may have a transcendental experience and you may be in a transcendent state, but you may also experience some sorrow. It is not that you are completely freed from sorrow, as Bhagavad Gita teaches. You will have sorrow, but you will not get agitated. You will not become overexcited or depressed or something like that. Or you will experience the happy situation, but you are not overexcited by even that. So that's equanimity of mind. So the first thing Krishna teaches Arjuna is to develop the equanimity of mind, to remain in that state. And then, there are so many other verses within that stanza. So where Krishna is teaching Arjuna how one has to overcome, one has to control the mind, you see, and how if you start thinking about something, how because of thinking itself, you get attached to that, and then how that attachment will result in desire, and results when the desire is not fulfilled, how it leads to frustration, and how when frustration occurs, then the anger comes, the classic frustration aggression hypothesis. So that comes up, and then when you are in aggressive mood, how you lose the discriminative ability and how it can lead to your downfall. So there is a, dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodho vijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibramaha smriti bhramshat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. The man is completely lost. So it's a sequence, you see, it's a continuous sequence which Krishna is describing to Arjuna.
It sounds like a very detailed psychological process.
Yes, it is a very detailed psychological process, and whatever that we are speaking today about negative conditioning and, the conditioning stimulus and everything, all that is, put together inside that. So, and then, there are other verses where how the mind will, go away. It is like the sail of a boat which is cut asunder will simply fly off in the air. Like that, how the mind will fly. So how we need to regulate it and tie it, and how to control it. So that is another thing. So there are about some 20 verses, or 20 or 22, where you get a classical description of what is mind, how it functions, how to regulate it, how to, come out of your desire, your negative emotions, And somebody can take up a whole dissertation on that and try to work it out.
Mental discipline.
Mental discipline, basically. Yeah. So finally, when you reach the transcendent state, what it is, that's also described.
Yes.
So it's a state of an extraordinary peace. That's how it says. Shanti. So a person will reach Shanti.
Which is Sanskrit for peace.
Peace, yes. Sanskrit for peace. Exactly. Yeah. A peace which is associated with transcendent state. It is not just the peace which comes by switching off this fan or stop talking. It is antarmauna, internal silence.
Well, I know the Bhagavad Gita goes into great detail describing the nuances of the transcendental state.
Exactly. Yeah. It speaks of, you see, the nuances of transcendental states are described separately in one of the chapters. So it also speaks of various differentiated states of which is not exactly the way Patanjali's Yoga Sutra speaks. It gives a kind of a description of the ultimate state of that meditation, where how you meditate, what you do, how you have to meditate, and all those descriptions are given.
And then, as I understand it, the real highlight of the Bhagavad Gita is when Krishna reveals himself as the incarnation of Vishnu.
Yes, that is true. Because he is the reincarnation of Vishnu, he reveals his true nature, because Krishna as a human being and Krishna as an incarnation of Vishnu are two different things. So there is a description of it, and usually that description is portrayed in movies or in artwork as, a whole lot of things happening around him, death, destruction happening, people are created, so many things, and all those descriptions are there. I cannot answer whether that is how it happened or it did not happen, because but those descriptions are there, but I cannot say anything on that. I don't want to comment on that particular part, but Arjuna gets a real understanding of who Krishna is in his completeness. Because if I say anything, then it is all secondary information I will be repeating to you. As people have understood, we had a television serial called Mahabharata. So in the television serial, the producer and the directors have come up with visions of that Vishnu, see, based on thorough research in different versions of Mahabharata, how it was, what it was, and all that. Now, we just have to accept that. And the only thing I can say as a psychologist again is, it is possible that you experience such visions, because Stanislav Grof did psychedelic research and later switched to holotropic breathing technique. And many of the participants in his workshops came up with descriptions of different worlds, different realities. They spoke about it. All that is documented. So in that, some of the descriptions goes back to certain description given in our mythologies, what we call Purana. So it is possible that our psyche, you see, the psyche is limited. And you know William James' often quoted statement, normal waking consciousness is one possible consciousness, whereas there are other consciousness, lying just be stimulated, and without reckoning with all that, our account with reality is incomplete. See, this is what William James has said, right? So Indian tradition has also triggered all that awareness. So when you trigger to all that experiences, it is possible that so many different phenomena may be perceived.
I think the Buddhists refer to 10,000 visions.
Yes, exactly. So in a way, transpersonal research is in an empirical verification and validation of our Puranas. As far as I see it, it was once, it is described there. But how many thousands of years ago, how many centuries ago, we don't know how it happened. But today, should we believe in that? Should we not believe in that? If we believe in that, we ask, okay, what is who has experienced it? Okay. Now, one of the empirical evidence that we can consider is the varieties of psychedelic experiences. Master and Houston.
Yes.
It was published back in 1977 or 78 when I was doing my doctoral studies. I caught hold of that book and I read all those descriptions.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So it is possible that such experiences are there. But all of them are psychological experiences. But the Indian tradition says, go beyond the psyche and there is a self, Atman. So that subtle distinction need to be, retained.
The Atman is like the ground of all being.
Ground of being, exactly. It's the ground awareness. In the backdrop of that ground awareness, all the phenomenological reality, whatever that is happening. And it is like, you go to the Quiet Tower, for example, or you go to Eiffel Tower or Empire State Building or wherever. A high point, you have windows all the sides, right? So if you look through that window, you get one particular landscape. If you look at that window, you get another landscape. You turn to a third window, you get another landscape. Okay, all that landscape is you are getting differently because the window from which you are looking is limited and it is in a way directed or focused in one particular direction. So our normal consciousness are like those windows. So we are looking at reality within a particular framework. And we are getting exposed to certain aspects of reality.
Even an exalted visionary experience is yet another window.
Yeah, another window. Yeah. So psyche is infinite. Psyche is compared to nature. In the Indian tradition, our psyche is compared to nature. Or nature itself is psyche. Because the Sankhya system speaks of the evolution of nature from the psychological point of view. How there is a microcosmic and macrocosmic correspondence. So all that thinking is there in the Indian tradition. And we have a perspective where nature is also seen as an evolute of the mind. All the constructionism, not the social constructionism that I am speaking of.
The deeper level.
It is a constructionism of physical reality also. It is not the social constructionism which related to cultural differences, etc. Even at a deeper level. So therefore, You see, when you ask the question about Arjuna seeing the Vishwarupa, it is called Vishwarupa Darshana. Vishwa is universe. Giving a vision of the whole cosmos, whole universe. How it was, I being a very ordinary psychologist sitting here, I cannot visualize what Arjuna saw, but we can kind of, through our thinking and inference, we can try to bridge what could have happened.
Well, to the Western mind, to Americans in particular, there was a moment when the very first atomic bomb was exploded, and Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist who developed the atomic bomb, when he saw that explosion, he said, brighter than 10,000 suns.
Yes.
And he was quoting from the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
It was as if in an atomic explosion, Oppenheimer thought, God was revealing himself. Which is sort of evocative of the idea of the war and the battlefield and many of the tensions that we spoke of earlier.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, as you explained to me yesterday, doesn't the Bhagavad Gita really say that this transcendental state is beyond all description?
Yeah, it is beyond all description. So, whatever description comes, it is post the state. When you are in that ground awareness state, when the ground of being is there cannot be any description. Because in one of the Upanishads, older Upanishads, it is said, what is that state? It says, where the mind and speech will return from the what you call the dividing line. It can go up to that point. And after that, mind and speech will return. So it is said, yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. Along with mind, where the speech also returns, it is that state. So what state? That state. So now, having experienced that state, when people are asked, when somebody has to give a description, how can you describe something which doesn't have a referent altogether, neither in the name nor in the form? So you don't have a referent for that. But still, if you have to describe, then you think of some metaphors, some analogies, and you try to put it across. You see, it depends upon your vocabularies. I tell you how this, experiencing is one thing, describing and explaining is another thing. Because much of the problem today, as far as transpersonal psychology, parapsychology, and many of the phenomenon, is not the question of experience. It is the question of describing it adequately and explaining it. You see, you ask people across the world. People across the world, common people, lay people many have experienced, such phenomena. Precognitive dreams. Yesterday we were talking. You were referring to your own experience. I refer to my father's experience, my brother's experience. I was referring to that. I can't say they were lying to me. What will they gain by telling some lies about me? They were sharing their experiences with me. But how it happens, when you ask the question how it happens, it's a matter of explanation. So when you can't explain something, either you reject the phenomenon or you distort it, as it has happened in psychoanalysis. You call it hallucination, right? You call it something else. Or you say, oh, forget it. It is not possible. But people who undergo some experience, they have to communicate it. Okay. So even a very ordinary thing like eating something and saying whether it is sweet or sour. See, sweet and sour are concepts, basically. That's all. And how did we arrive at sweet and sour? Sugar is sweet. Tamarind is sour. How did we arrive at that? How did I and you agree on that? So there is some kind of a mutual validation, intersubjective agreement between me and you regarding the state. Is it sweet? How are we really saying that's sweet? If you just reflect upon that, it is some kind of a learning where we are taught, this is sweet, that's the name. What we call in Sanskrit nama. An object is called rupa. That object can be not necessarily a concrete thing, it could be abstract. Also like the experiencing of sweetness, for example. So, what is sweetness? Can anybody describe what is sweetness or sourness?
It's very individual. What is sweet to me may not be, could be sour to you for all we know.
For all we know. But still we agree, right?
We agree that if we both taste sugar, we call it sweet.
Sweet, yes. How did that intersubjective agreement came up in the beginning, to begin with? Yeah. You just reflect upon that. Then you will see that if we cannot exactly describe and give an explanation how we agreed on the sweetness of the sugar, how can we agree on a transcendental phenomenon? Right. It is so difficult.
Well, I would imagine the ancient rishis were confronted with this problem.
Yeah, they did. For that they used, the Upanishads was just that. Actually, it was sharing, Upanishad in Sanskrit means sitting near, like you and me are sitting, sharing our experiences, elaborating upon, discussing about it, clarifying, arriving at some terminologies and concepts. So Upanishads are full of this only. And Bhagavad Gita is also considered as a kind of a Upanishad because Krishna is speaking about a state of existence to Arjuna, and he is clarifying that, and he is trying to say in the ultimate cosmic plan, what is your role, what is your place, and what are you supposed to do at that moment. So, it is all, to be seen in the backdrop of a broader vision, a broader understanding of reality.
And so Arjuna has this vision. He understands the divine nature of consciousness.
Yes.
And then, as I understand, the Bhagavad Gita closes, and then Arjuna goes into battle.
Yeah. Before that, Krishna tells, in the last verse, he says, I have told you all these things now. But even now, the choice is yours. He is like a Roger, unconditional positive regard. Being non-directive, he tells Arjuna, Yathechasi tatha kuru. You do whatever way you like. I have given you all this information. I have given you all this knowledge. But now the choice is yours. Do you want to run away from the battlefield? Or you want to go and fight the war? See, that's the beauty. Giving all the knowledge, but still being non-directive there.
Because Arjuna has a choice. He could choose a path of non-violence, but I gather that the choice he chooses is related to the concept of dharma.
Yes. See, this concept of non-violence is definitely part of Indian tradition. You are familiar with the Jaina tradition?
Yes.
So in the Jaina tradition, you know that they will take food before 6 o'clock in the evening because they feel that by chance some insects may go inside and, they will be killed. So they don't want to harm even an insect. And if you have seen the Jain Muni, they are called Jain Muni, though they will put a white cloth, they will cover their mouth with a white cloth, and you must have seen in the pictures or in reality, they don't want even insects to go inside being killed. So to that level, the idea of non-violence has been taken.
Now this is, we should point out, this is not a Vedic tradition.
It is not a Vedic tradition.
Yeah.
So, in the Vedic tradition, we had animal sacrifices. Whereas in the Jaina tradition, the non-violence was taken to another extreme.
Yes.
But you see, both Vedic tradition and Jaina tradition are supposed to be contemporaneous. They existed in as ancient time as we can think of in Indian culture. Mm-hmm. So what happens is, these two traditions have emerged independently, perhaps, and nobody knows exactly when they developed, which precedes or which is anterior.
They're both very, very ancient.
Yeah, very, very ancient, and there are lots of claims, controversies as to a general belief is Vedic tradition is ancient. That is the general belief. But there is no, again, clear chronological timetable.
No, but as you explained to me earlier, the one date that we know of clearly is the Buddha.
Yes.
Around 400-500 BC. And these traditions would be prior.
Prior to that. They are all prior to that, and they are very ancient. So how they developed these, on the yajna, and the violence involved in animal sacrifice, and the, non-violent movement, all these are very ancient. And the idea of non-violence, as I have understood, I can only explain. You see, violence, if you go back to the idea of aggression, how does aggression emerge? As we have studied in psychology, it is fundamentally related to our sense of security. When our sense of survival and security are threatened, we have to defend, and in the process of defending, one becomes aggressive. Right?
Yes.
So, the aggression ultimately is related to one's survival and one's existence. And how do I get threatened? I can get threatened from the other. I is there as a self, and there is an other which threatens me. The other need not be a human being. For example, if a motor vehicle is coming fast, or if a boulder starts falling, if a rock starts falling suddenly where I am, then also my existential, security need gets triggered.
The survival instinct.
Survival instinct. So then I have a fight or flight reaction, which is basic, right? So when it is a rock coming down, I better, flight, not fight, because I cannot fight that. Yeah. But we have crossed that kind of physical danger situations, which is mostly common in other animals, where they feel more threatened by other animals. They have all that. Yeah. So we have overcome one level of that sense of survival necessity. But the survival has shifted from the biological survival to psychological level, where the survival of the sense of identity and the ego. Okay. So when that ego survival is threatened, then, all the defense mechanisms are invoked. Freud is correct there. Freud spoke of defense mechanisms, and all that comes into picture. Okay. So now how does that happen? Because I feel threatened because I have that sense of self and separateness. Okay. So then I feel threatened. But if you are able to go beyond that feeling of separateness, do you feel threatened by the other? When you are grounded in your identity, which is not just egoic, then the idea of self-other boundary is transcended. Okay, so you don't get into aggression, you don't get into violence. So that is why the differentiation between the self and the other, when it is transcended, perhaps non-violence will emerge automatically in that state of consciousness. Because I have read in the biographies of many mystics, many yogis, who are authentic. And, many animals, even wild animals, they feel calm in the presence of great maharshis. Okay. Because they can relate, they have kind of that feeling of fear, insecurity has gone completely from them. So in the biography of Ramana Maharshi, you come across many such instances being recorded. So therefore, I think more you evolve spiritually, less you see the differentiation between the self and the other. More and more non-violent you will become.
And even the survival instinct becomes less important.
Less important.
If your awareness is grounded in the Atman, then life and death take on a whole different perspective.
That is exactly. But for others, you can consciously practice. See, that is one of the prescriptions in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Ahimsa. You have yama and niyama.
Yes.
So you have ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. You have 5 ethical practices which you have to do, you see, in your social interaction. The first one is ahimsa, non-violent. You have to consciously practice. If you have to consciously practice, it is, you have to practice means you have to stop thinking self and other boundary. First of all, we tend to protect our ego. The tendency to protect one's ego has to slowly decrease. All these practices are geared towards that. And non-violence is a part of that. So less and less you feel threatened. More and more you become non-violent. So it's some kind of a reciprocal relation. And it's a gradual evolution.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, even though Krishna does, or Arjuna does go into battle, he might just as readily have chosen a different choice, and it would have been consistent with the teachings of Krishna.
Yes, there is one particular reference to exactly death. How death is viewed in Bhagavad Gita. So what Krishna tells Arjuna is, you see, you are thinking, oh God, I am going to kill all these people. I am going to commit a crime. but I have already killed them. Krishna says, I have already killed them. I have not understood the metaphorical or the hidden meaning of it. You see, maybe another few years when I mature, I may understand it. But along with that, he says something about life and death, which I think is very important to understand. He says, you see, souls take birth after birth. Okay? So, what is death and what is life? So, Krishna tells Arjuna, look, what will you do when your clothes are worn out? You will throw the worn out cloth, cast it out away, and you will put on a new dress. That's all you do, right? So similarly, there is a soul in the body. That is called Dehin. Deha means body. Dehin means the one who resides in the body. So, the soul. So, this soul is casting away the torn cloth, and it is taking on a new cloth, new body. So, what is your problem? You are not, when you say killing, you are not really killing the person. That's a soul that will continue its journey. In this incarnation, as a soul, Duryodhana or his brothers or anybody have done something and they need to be punished. But you are not killing Duryodhana's soul. You are not doing it. You cannot do that. So it is just that. See, now this is a perspective where the issue of reincarnation is so clearly told.
Yeah.
Now what happens is, everything that is told in Mahabharata or Ramayana or Upanishads or Bhagavad Gita, it is all spoken from a transcendental perspective. Okay. Now, if I speak from a waking standpoint, without having any glimpse of what transcendence could be, there is always a confusion. You cannot reconcile. I used to give, when I had to explain transcendence in the class to my students, I used to give an analogy which many students think was very useful to them to understand. In Mysore, where I live, we have a hill called Chamundi Hill, where the goddess Chamundi temple is there, which is one of the tourist attractions, right? So, I used to give the example. You go to the foot of the Chamundi Hill and you stand. What do you see? Whatever you see in the front, a whole landscape. There may be houses, there may be trees, there may be a water flowing creek or a river, rivulet. Whatever is there in front of your eyes, you are seeing. Okay? So now you climb up several steps. You go to halfway to the top and then you stand. What happens? Your vision is not ground vision. Okay? You start seeing a much farther view of Mysore city, depending upon which direction you are facing. Okay? Then you see many things which you could not have seen when you are in the foothill. But halfway, you see so many things. And then you go to the top of the hill. When you go to the top of the hill, you see a 360-degree view of all that is there. Okay? So now we will imagine, okay, a bus is going. In the foothill, I see a bus moving from this end to that end. I am able to see that much. Okay? So it is present to me. And then I go halfway. I see that that bus has gone further. I go still further. I see that a bus is coming far away. Another bus is going far away that side. Another bus is going here. So you imagine the one in the far left, one in the far right. That is past. This is future. The one in the center is the present. Now, what I could see in the foothill was the present. But what you can see is the past and the future. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, I am able to see the past and future of all these people. But you are only seeing the present. That's why you have all this conflict. Don't bother. Just do whatever you require. I know from where they were born, what they are going to happen in the future to them. So now, standing in the foothill, standing in the top of the hill, gives you a different vision and perspective. So, whatever that we have inherited from India, with all that wisdom, has come from the top of the hill. And I am standing in the foot of the hill. And I cannot evaluate that vision from my vision standing here. That's the basic issue.
Well, Kiran, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom. I think you're not just at the bottom of the hill. You have climbed up a few times, and I'm so delighted to be able to share that with our viewers. So thank you so much for coming to Albuquerque and being with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was my pleasure that I got a chance to meet you and have some conversation with you. That's great.
And thank you for being with us.